Our top story right now is the Israel-Hamas war developments that have come in. The war has flattened large parts of North Gaza and killed over 18,000 and driven most of the population to the southern part of the besieged territory. Now, some 1.9 million Palestinians, nearly 85% of Gaza's population, have fled their homes. The Israeli army said that it had uncovered the biggest Hamas tunnel in the Gaza Strip so far, and the army also said that the underground passage formed part of a wider branching network that stretched for more than 4 kilometers and came within 1,300 feet of the area's border crossing.
So far, we have uncovered more than 4 kilometers of the tunnel's web. This is a flagship project of Hamas. It reaches a depth of 50 meters below the surface of the earth. Inside the tunnels, we found many weapons. This is no ordinary tunnel. It is a city of terror underground that Hamas dug and built instead of investing money in the residents of Gaza.
The Israeli forces also released a video of Mohammed Sinwar, the right-hand man and brother of Gaza chief Yahya Sinwar, being driven in a car through the massive tunnel. Now, in a silent video, Sinwar can be seen giving instructions to the driver as they travel through the tunnel at a significant speed in a fairly modern-looking vehicle. The Syrian Defense Ministry said Israeli airstrikes against targets near Damascus wounded 2 Syrian soldiers on Sunday. A UK-based war monitor said Israeli aircraft struck Syrian regime anti-aircraft defenses and positions of Hezbollah near Saida Zainab district south of the capital. An Israeli hostage mistakenly killed by soldiers in the Gaza Strip was buried on Sunday. The 26-year-old Alan Shamriz was one of 3 Israeli hostages who were shot dead by soldiers during an operation in Shijaya. And even as they carried a white flag and cried for help in Hebrew. An Israeli hostage abducted by Hamas on October 7th from the Supernova Music Festival has been confirmed dead. The hostages and missing persons families forum said that Inbar Haman was murdered at some point after she was kidnapped from the desert rave. Now, the Israeli army also released images showing banners hung by the 3 hostages mistakenly killed by Israeli troops with the writing, "Help, 3 hostages," and SOS.
You escaped against all the chances and did everything to return home. So unfortunate. With all that you went through in those moments, you already saw the light, but it became darkness. Those who abandoned you also murdered you after you did everything right.
Palestinian Health Ministry stated that Israeli forces killed 5 Palestinians Sunday morning at a refugee camp in the West Bank. The Israeli military said airstrikes targeted militants who had endangered soldiers. And according to the Palestinian ministry, more than 290 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces or settlers in the West Bank since October 7th. Now, Paris condemned an Israeli bombardment in Gaza, which caused the death of one of its foreign ministry officials who had taken refuge in the Rafah home of a colleague. The ministry demanded Israeli authorities shed light on the circumstances of this bombardment as soon as possible. Now, it did not give the name or nationality of the official who had worked for France since 2002. Pope Francis deplored the death of 2 women in a Catholic parish in Gaza, where he said defenseless civilians were targeted by shootings and bombings.
Unarmed civilians are being bombed and shot at. And this has even happened inside the Holy Family Parish compound, where there are no terrorists but families, children and sick people with disabilities and nuns.
The head of the World Health Organization denounced the effective destruction of the hospital in north of Gaza, adding that at least 8 patients had died. Tedros Adhanom said a 9-year-old child was among the deceased patients. Now, for more on this, we have with us our correspondent, Jody Cohen. Jody, what can you tell us about the reports that a new hostage release deal and accompanying humanitarian pause in the fighting could be on the table?
Hi Aditi. Yes, so over the weekend there was a big rally in Tel Aviv and people were calling there for the government to really prioritise trying to secure a hostage release deal for the more than 130 Israeli hostages that are still being kept in Gaza. Now that was after the Israel Defense Forces mistakenly shot 3 of the hostages in Gaza, and the IDF said that Hamas has been setting traps for its soldiers, including using Hebrew and shooting at soldiers after appearing to surrender. Now, Minister Gantz has said that the top priority for the government is to try and secure the return of the remaining hostages, and that the second priority is to battle Hamas. But we do know that Israel believes that military pressure is the best way to secure that hostage deal. But according to Egyptian security sources who've spoken to Reuters, they say that Israel and Hamas are both open to a new deal. Hamas's precondition is for more aid to be allowed into Gaza, and Israel has opened the Kerem Shalom crossing between Israel and Gaza for more aid. But the Israeli spokesperson has repeatedly said that Israel is inspecting enough aid and that the bottleneck is with international agencies not getting the aid in, and also Hamas stealing the aid for its fighters. And in the latest, Israeli media is showing a video which reportedly shows Hamas stealing aid trucks. In the meantime, we know that Mossad head David Barnea is going to be meeting with Qatar's Prime Minister for more talks on a potential new hostage deal, but it is expected to take time.
And Jody, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is going to be visiting Israel later on Monday, today, at around the same time as another UN Security Council resolution is likely to be voted on, calling for a ceasefire, vetoed on, to be calling for a ceasefire. Now, do you think that US will use its veto again?
Right, so there have been growing calls for a ceasefire. Hamas says that more than 18,000 Gazans have been killed. Israel says that number includes more than 7,000 Hamas terrorists, that they target Hamas and not civilians, but that Hamas hides behind civilians, using them as human shields, including using ambulances for cover. And they say that they found weapons in baby incubators in hospitals. Israel set up 150 shelters, we know, and has produced an active map to try and help civilians avoid the fighting. And White House spokesperson John Kirby has said that Israel's done possibly more than the US would have done to give advance warning of its strikes. The US, as you said, used its veto at the last UN Security Council resolution vote, which was calling for a ceasefire, and we've got another vote that's going to take place later on today. Whether or not the US will use its veto will really depend on the language. Israel and the United States has said that a ceasefire would keep Hamas in power, and the US wants to see the language amended on the cessation of hostilities. Meanwhile, as you said, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is going to be in Israel later on Monday. No doubt they're going to be discussing this, also the timetable of the war, protecting civilians, and also reportedly a new maritime protection force that is said to be being set up after attacks on shipping by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen.